What's your duck? I am an arsehole moment. What's your name? I asked, Shara. Trying to be playful. Oh cool. Like a Cicero with a lisp. I have a lisp. My name is Sarah. Oof. I was making fun of an old guy I'd seen outside our school at a basketball tournament to some friends in the locker room. He looked and talked like Farmer Fran from The Waterboy. Turned out to be the dad of one of the guys I was talking to. Still can't even think of that movie without it bringing up endless amounts of shame. Posting on Reddit sometimes makes me reread my it and realize I'm being an asshole. I don't do it on purpose, but I think years of reading and writing posts on the internet has tainted my tone. I blamed my fart on a mentally challenged boy in 5th grade. I was in the army, making fun of a guy. Said he couldn't even get a medal for something in the Special Olympics. He then pointed out his daughter was in the Special Olympics. I profusely apologized, and he accepted, but it still keeps me awake at night. I was drunk at a pub and shouted for the band to play Free Bird. They stopped in the middle of the song they were playing, started up Free Bird and called me up on stage to sing it. I froze, forgot all the lyrics and made an absolute ass of myself. Props to that band though. When I realized the reason I've lost so many friends is that I'm so itty at getting back to people. I developed a pretty serious drinking problem, and in one day everyone finally had enough. I got fired, kicked out of my apartment, disowned by my friends and my family. I was left utterly alone and homeless, with $2,000 and a 1986 Volvo station wagon. It was coordinated between everyone in my life, and it ducking hurt. But I wouldn't take any of it back for the world. Things are far better now, but that was the sort of life event that is supposed to change you, and I let it do so for the better. One day while I was walking on the street, some kids kicked a ball in my direction. I was going to pass it back but I thought one of the kids closer would just get it. I decided to keep walking. I looked back at the kid and I could see the look of disappointment on his face. I felt like biggest asshole on the planet for a few days. I still feel bad thinking about it. My friend group tried to stay close after high school but we all fell out of touch as you do as everyone forged their own path in life. Well, mine led me down a path of depression, anxiety, and failure. So every year or so they would hold a get together to reconnect and hang out. I attended a couple of these, but as time went on and my downward spiral got worse I stopped responding to calls, texts, invites, etc. because I thought that no one would want to hang out with this version of me. I was invited to 2 weddings which I didn't even respond to because of this negative loop. And then when my best friend from that group was diagnosed with cancer I couldn't even bring myself to face him. I tried to go to his funeral but couldn't enter the building because I felt that I didn't deserve to be there. Finally a few months ago the parents of one of my friends saw me at work and wanted to talk to me. They told me that my friend group was really broken up, that I ignored all of their attempts to reach out to me. It was then that I realized that in all of my stress about being miserable to be around, I had become an arsehole to those who tried to care about me. Edit. I wrote this as a confession into a void, expecting it to get lost in the ether that is the internet. I never expected to get so much support to the point where I'm literally crying. Thank you everyone. I've been trying to get through it alone for the past 4 years and to know I'm not alone goes a long way. I was driving down a road and a lot of people were honking and yelling at me on the street. I got angry and flipped a bunch of people off and honked back. At the end of the street I saw a one-way sign and realized I was going in the wrong direction. In early high school, late 90s. So if you got a girl's number it was the house number. I called a girl's house and her dad answered. She was out, but I noticed his speech was a bit slow and slurred. Next day at school I mentioned I had called and asked if her dad had been drinking. Well, turns out he didn't drink much since his stroke. Still feel awful about that. Years ago I went into a Hot Topic and as I was at the register, the girl working started telling me about all the new Metallica shirts they had gotten. For some reason, I told her I wasn't really into wearing band shirts anymore, which was mostly true, and even though I didn't mean to, it came out sounding really snobbish. At the time, I thought her reaction was kinda strange, even accounting for my accidental condescension. Shortly after I left the store I remembered I was wearing a Nin shirt. Someone I hadn't talked to in years came up to me and started telling me about how they haven't been doing that good lately and that they found out they have cancer. Well, I was at work and only half paying attention, so after he stopped talking I said that's good. Haven't seen him since. I honked my horn at a car that stopped and blocked the road, only for a really old frail woman to slowly get out and very slowly get across to a food shop. This was during the last lockdown and was probably the only way she could get food. I still lie awake wishing I could say sorry, but it wasn't possible. Broke up with my first girlfriend who was really attached to me, just by ignoring her. I feel so bad. I was just a kid, but that was a harsh treatment. Teacher here walked into my co-worker's classroom, loudly and obnoxiously mocking a man from the district who is supposed to help us with instruction and provide support. She ushers me out of her room immediately and starts laughing, cause he was sitting in there to observe her next class. Told a girl I liked her accent and asked her where she was from. She told me she had a speech impediment. A lady told me she was hospitalized for months after she fell asleep at the wheel and drove her car off a cliff. She said she woke up right when the wheels went over, and I asked her was it worth it. She stared at me, wondering what I meant. So I continued, now you know what it's like to fly in a car. Every time my kid asks to try what I'm eating I always say that it's spicy and he won't like it, so I don't have to share. About 20 years ago I had some friends over for a party. At some point a girl spilled her drink all over my keyboard and all the keys got stuck and it didn't work. Somehow I got irrationally angry. She tried to apologize but I judged the effort too feeble. I tried to clean the keyboard, swearing aloud, which made her miserable. I finally slapped a big out of order notice on the keyboard right next to her. She got fed up and left, walking, in the snow, to her home 5 kilometers, 3.1 freedom units, away. When my friends just stared at me silently, I realized how big of an asshole I was. I ran after her and got her to return. We've been married for 9 years now. This entire year, been recovering from my divorce last year, and it forced me to take a hard, honest look at myself and all that I used to do and how I actually treated those around me. A lot of tough to swallow pills, but a lot of much needed reflection taken place. Just 3 seconds ago I had to stop myself from responding a Redditor parent that their child's Halloween costume is really ducking ugly. I rang and paid for a mowing service, and when the guy rocked up, I started telling him that I can't mow the lawn myself anymore as my injured ankle would play up and hurt for the rest of the day. Then he got out of the car and I realized he was an amputee from the knee down. I beat the actual shit out of a kid who was a grade below and about a foot shorter than me in middle school because he hit my sister. Granted, he was a little asshole, but I held him against the wall and punched him in the nose until he was bleeding everywhere. That's when I learned I have anger issues. Nearly every tantrum I had as a kid. Every time I get angry at my mum. When I realized I picked a side that benefited me more over the one which would be the correct side multiple times in arguments, fights and every other situation where such decision can be made. Driving home from work, stuck in rush hour traffic. My wife points out one of those dancing clowns with the advertising boards right outside our window. He was loving his job, dancing with not a care in the world, even waving at us poor schlubs. Though he was great, he actually lifted my spirits, so I figured I'd wave at him too. Yeah, I flipped him off. I have no idea why it came out that way and I didn't mean it to. It just ducking happened as traffic was starting to move again. I could see him in my mirrors. He was holding his hands out as if to say, WTF dude. Poor fella must have felt so defeated. I honestly didn't mean to do it, and my wife called me a prick. Hope he doesn't turn into the Joker or summit. When my son was about 3 months old I was out walking with him in his stroller. My anxiety was high and I had pretty bad postpartum depression. This kid on a skateboard was skating toward us. He was maybe 12 or 13. He was skating like he was just going past us and he was really going fast. He came within inches of the stroller, just flying. If he had lost control he would have crashed right into my newborn. Once he got just barely past me, I spun around, locked eyes with him and growled, "Motherfucker." I'll never forget the shock look on that kid's face. He had meant no harm by it. I cried when I got home and felt terrible. This was like 8 cents years ago. If you're reading this, skateboarding kid, I'm really sorry. When I told the hairdresser that I don't like my haircut as a kid, my buddy wanted to set me up with a new co-worker of his. I got to his apartment early and started getting drunk with his roommate. He called and said they were going to be late. He said, "She's a bigger girl. Don't mention her weight." He had told me this previously as well. By the time they showed up, I was pretty drunk and I wanted to make a good impression. I said, "You're not nearly as fat as they said you were." She turned around and fled. My girlfriend recently dumped me. Looking around my room and seeing all the things they bought me and being reminded of all the things they did for me and then noticing I hardly did anything in return. At HS graduation, a friend of mine was a foreign exchange student from Italy, and her parents were at the ceremony. I went up to them and just shouted, "Hi, I love Italians. IDKY. I just felt like a douchebag in that moment. I grew up fairly poor and as a kid, the concept of money didn't mean much to me. I just knew we had less things than the other kids in my class. So when the Nintendo started getting super popular, I asked my mum for one. She obviously refused since we couldn't afford it, but apparently, later on that evening I had drawn a picture of a Nintendo along with a comic strip of me and my mum playing a game on it together. Apparently she had stayed up that entire night crying because she had felt guilty about not being able to afford it, as my dad told me years later. At the movies once, it was just me and friends and one other group sitting in front. There was a guy in front that kept slurping on an icy really loudly, like he just really wanted to get every last drop. After a few minutes I got really agitated and made a super obnoxious and loud slurping sound to make them aware that it was annoying me. Literally as soon as I did it, I saw that it was a disabled man and his parents and he had a suction tube. I was so ashamed I walked out of the theater quietly whispering to them, "I'm so sorry." I never went back in. I used to tend bar. I was very busy at a freestanding bar. I was literally surrounded. I went to wait on the next customer. I made eye contact and asked what I could get him as I turned to throw something away. He gave no response. I asked again as I started wiping up a spot someone had vacated. No response. This kept going a couple more times. As customers were building up, I turned with a bit of attitude and said something to the effect of, "Sir, I'm getting deeper in the weeds and all these other people are getting pissed. You need to order or move aside so others can." He then informed me that he was deaf, and as I kept turning away, he couldn't read my lips. Oh duck, I am an asshole. I was running a bit late for work one afternoon, and traffic was oddly heavy for part of the drive. All these cars were driving like 15 under the speed limit. As soon as the road opened to 2 lanes, I slammed on the gas pedal and flew around this ridiculously slow line of cars, until I got to the car in the front driving so slow and realized it wasn't just some slow asshole. It was a hearse and I just flew past a funeral procession. In my defense, everyone I'd seen before had their hazards on and little flags on each car, so this sort of thing doesn't happen. But I felt awful. When you fight with your friend over something, leave, then realize they were right. I walked into Home Depot bathroom one evening just before close. As soon as I went in, I heard a sad voice from the stall say, "Hello? Can you get me some toilet paper?" I proceeded to slowly back out, hop in my car and go home. I don't know why I did it, but I choose my path that day. I asked 2 black ladies at work what language they were speaking. I'm really big into languages and I felt like I hadn't heard the one they were speaking before. English. They were speaking English and they just both happened to have really thick accents. When I got banned from ATA Vegas, second to last row for a Blue Man Group show, the people behind us were talking loudly the entire show. They were basically giving a play-by-play of everything going on. We shushed and glared repeatedly to no avail. By the end of the show we were so mad that we were going to throw some harsh words their way. The lights come up. We turn around. There was a group of people and their obvious chaperones. This was a group of blind people. Many of them had no eyes. We slipped away feeling just awful about our behavior. We really should have apologized. Okay, so my husband and I, when we first started dating, went out to a super fancy restaurant. One that at the end of your meal takes your plate, boxes your leftovers for you, and brings it out in a bag. A few nights later we went to another restaurant, not as fancy. We were lost in conversation when the waiter came over to ask if we needed boxes for our leftovers. Me, completely not thinking, lifted up my plate to hand it to him, thinking he was there to take it, box it up, and bring it back. Not that kind of restaurant. Definitely one that would bring you a styrofoam container, pack up your own it. This poor waiter, so kind and confused, took my plate and walked back to the back room. He brought it back out a few minutes later nicely boxed. My husband, new boyfriend at the time, was shocked. Like, what kind of arsehole am I dating? Stopped mid-sentence and stared at my ashlery. When it dawned on me what I'd done, I've never been more embarrassed. To this day I still wonder if the guy spit in my food. My dad's a prankster, and whenever we complained about his jokes he would always say, "But after I die, you will miss my jokes." So one time he was acting dumb and I was tired of him and told him to stop, and he began to say, "But after I die." And I replied, "Everyone will be happy." He went silent and looked hurt. Not my proudest moment. Whoa, a lot of comments. Sorry for not replying to all of you. I'll try to sum up all my answers here. My relationship with my dad's not the best ever since I was a child. Also not the worst compared to other stories on Reddit. Many of his jokes consisted of making fun of people, including me. Specifically how I dressed and that I was a weirdo since an early age. I was around 10 when this happened. I haven't apologized and I should, and I will probably do it. Unfortunately, he indeed was hurt by my response, but that didn't stop him to continue being a prankster. I believe I have matured and now I'm way more careful to what I say to him and the people I care about. We are still working on our relationship and trying to become closer, but I doubt we will ever be 100% close because we have said and done hurtful things to each other through the years. I hope everyone has a better and more loving relationship with your parents. My best friend asked me to pull into a Burger King drive-thru. It was really late and I was positive they were closed. He was sure they were open. I pulled up to the speakers and yelled FCKU, sue my fat white D, at the top of my lungs. Looked at my friend and went, "See, they're closed." And then I heard someone starting to say something and sped out. I had one a few years ago. I was heavy. I still am. But less so today, thank God. But I was in the car with my mom and I was waiting for this semi-overweight lady to walk across the street. As she's walking the street, I absent-mindedly say, "Get a move on, land whale." My mom turns to me and says, "Look who's talking. She's thinner than you. You know you're fat when your mom doesn't let you make fat jokes anymore." Was working the register at a restaurant and the guy asked, "How much is this gonna cost me?" I responded, "An arm and a leg." The guy was missing half his arm. Yesterday when I went to a great hamburger place, Blue Moon in Seattle, I hadn't been to in several years and looked forward to going to for several weeks. But they were out of hamburger patties, so they put a black bean patty on my burger without telling me until well after I already paid. Also, their flagship burger has onions and peanut butter on it, but they were out of both. That was really disappointing. There was only one person working there, and I gave her a really hard time. I thought I was justified at the time, but now I feel guilty. My best friend and I got insanely drunk. We're both good people and avoid drama, but she started this massive argument about what direction my house was in and would not let it go. I told her over and over for 20 minutes I wasn't going to engage in this, that she needed to stop, that I didn't care what direction my house was and Uber didn't need to know. And then a few weeks later, after she hadn't talked to me, I assumed she was in honeymoon phase with her new BF. Normal for her. Our mutual friend said she's been saying I hit her in the face head. My instinct was to say of course I would never hit someone, let alone somewhere like the face, but I remember being frustrated enough that slapping the idiot out of her might have been what I was aiming for. Was flirting with this woman at a friend's gathering and towards the end of the night I realized all I wanted was to sleep with her, but gave her the impression I liked her. I was never a one night stand guy. I ducked off right then and never spoke to her again. Double asshole. I pointed out a minor typo in a person's comment. Turns out he had dyslexia. I was talking with this girl one time, and we were talking about how we should hang out sometime. She mentioned a movie theater having some sort of deal on a certain day of the week. We exchanged phone numbers to try to make plans at some point. My idiot ass thought she was talking as friends, when I later realized she probably meant it as something more. And I was busy enough with schoolwork that I didn't even think about it for a while. TLDR, I think a girl wanted me to ask her out, but I was too dumb to realize it and basically ghosted her. I met with a friend and casually asked her about if she's planning to have kids. Mind you, I'm a new mom of 2, staying at home, and kids are basically my life now. Most of my friends are parents. She wasn't yet, so I casually asked, to which she rightfully replied, "You know that's a D question. Do you? I'm never asking this again. I'm very sorry." A few hours after I learned a guy's wife had passed away, I had a bit too much to drink and I quoted the worst possible line from The Office that I could have quoted at the time. "I'm gonna dig up Scan's dead wife and I'm gonna hump her real good." The realization hit me as soon as the words left my mouth. He was cool about it, but it still keeps me up at night sometimes.